Welcome to Small Arm Solutions. Today we're looking at the Sig Copperhead, which is a very, very small version of the MPX that we know very well. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, first of all, I want to talk a little bit about 9mm submachine guns. Now, in the United States, U.S. military as well as law enforcement, the 9mm submachine gun has really been outdated for over 20 years. If you look back in the 80s when the MP5 was very popular with SWAT teams and police and even somewhat military, that pretty much died out. And there's some good reason for that. It took a little bit of while for people to figure out that the 5.56mm is a much better urban or a more of a close quarter battle weapon than a 9mm due to the fact that the bullets have a very thin jacket, and when they hit plasterboard, they hit concrete, the bullets come apart. Where the 9mm doesn't do that. 9mm can actually go through a lot of that, and it can have more collateral damage, or it can have more penetration through barriers and through buildings. Now, that was true for the U.S., but it was not true for overseas. I can tell you from being overseas that you look in the Middle East, you look at South America, you look at the Caribbean. The 9mm submachine gun is still considered a very viable weapon in those parts of the world. So, again, although their 9mm was primarily just a commercial weapon here in the U.S., overseas it was not. So we look at some of the weapons that were used back in those days, within the U.S. and even more current. You're looking at the Colt 9mm submachine gun. You're looking at the HK MP5 for the most part. Those were the two major ones, as well as the Uzi. The Uzi probably had a little bit of popularity, but the MP5 was truly the gun of choice of SWAT teams. So you look at the Colt, where you had a standard direct blowback. Then we look at the MP5, which had a delayed roller blowback. That was the MP5 did have a locked breech. A little more sensitive with ammunition due to the way that the gun was designed. There's a lot of people who are very, very fond of the MP5s. I'm not really one of them. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the human engineering on the gun is very, very poor. If you look at how you have to load it, it doesn't lock up on the last shot. The way you have to insert the magazine, the way you got to pull the handle back to reload every single time. The way even with my big hands, the safety is harder to manipulate. I just never got into the lure of the MP5. Where then you look at like the Colt submachine gun, where you had the same manual of arms you had with the M16 M4, which the M16 series is known to have the best human engineering in the world for as far as location of controls and whatnot. But when it comes to the 9mm, it's not the same as the 5.56. The 9mm, you're going to have a lot more recoil. Believe it or not, you do have more recoil with the direct blowback. The gun does wear a lot more on the hammer and trigger pins, or basically the hammer pin is one of the big wear points. So is the disconnector on the 9mm submachine gun. And also, if you look at the way that it fed, there were some issues too. Well, Sig introduced a couple years back the MPX, and this particular one here is the MPX SBR. It's 8.5-inch barrel, and I have a cylindrical cannon here. This is my personal rifle. I'm extremely fond of it. In fact, I think the MPX is probably the most advanced 9mm SMG in the industry right now. And it's many, many reasons. First off, we have the manual of arms of the M4. We also have a external piston locked breech carbine. So what happens when you have a locked breech? Well, first of all, you're going to get better accuracy because you're going to have a locked breech. You're not going to have the bolt going forward on an open bolt like you would with an Uzi. And also, for as far as keeping the bolt locked, you have more reliability than you do with a delayed blowback or a blowback type operation. It's just more reliable, and it's more precision about having that breech locked. So I definitely think it's a major increase in reliability, durability, and I think even in accuracy. I'm quite fond of the Colt pattern. I have a couple of them. They're accurate. Don't get me wrong. They are accurate. However, I just tend to think that this one here was this is next level 9mm SMG. You do have the free floating barrel. You do have the piston. You do have the manual of arms is very important. This particular one has the telescopic stock, the collapsing, where you can get side fold, and there's several different options you can have on here. Your iron sights, and you also have a Trichicon MRO on here as well. This is an ideal setup for any kind of a 9mm submachine gun setup that you would need. Accurate, reliable. The magazines are modern. They're easy to load. 30-round magazines made by Lancer. The only thing that this thing's probably a little outdated on was the fact that this is a key mod rail, which I'm sure there's some, you can definitely get M-Lock now for it. But, I really think this is a very well-made, well set up. It's reliable. If I had to give this one any negative, it probably would be with the suppressor, because of the fact with the suppressor you do get a lot of gas coming from the back. You get a lot more coming from the back than you would with, say, a CZ Scorpion, something where it's totally closed off in the back. And the other thing with SIG right now is you also have complete SIG weapon systems now too. You have SIG optics, you have SIG ammunition, as you can see here, as well as the SIG firearm. We'll talk a bit more about that a little bit later. But the Copperhead really does come from the MPX weapons family. Shown here is the Copperhead. We can see this is a very strange looking little gun. The different kind of a pistol grip. We also have a brace on here. This is a telescopic brace. So you can pull that right out, and then your brace opens up, as you see, like so, and you have your brace in here. Well, let's talk a little bit about where this one came from. Not a lot of people know that this didn't just come out of the blue. This was actually a military program. In 2018, the U.S. Army came out with a request for info on the first RFI for a 9mm submachine gun since World War II. RFI is a request for information. It was for what they referred to as the SCW, or subcompact weapon. They had some requirements for that. First, 9x19. Second, they had to be selective fire. Third, they had to have full-length top 1913 rail they'd be able to mount optics on. And D, it would be required to have a sound suppressor. In fact, the system would come with a sound suppressor. It'd probably be one of the first weapons the U.S. military has ever had that was standard equipped with a sound suppressor. And what this was for was referred to as the PSD, or Personal Security Details. With the onset of the war in Iraq, there was basically a need for a security detail that would guard and protect high-ranking military officers and COs, as well as any kind of dignitaries. I guess if you would, it would be more like the U.S. Army Secret Service. These would be guys who would do the exact same personal protection. However, they would not be wearing sunglasses and suits. They would be, regular BDUs. These guys are specifically trained for personal protection details. They needed a weapon that was small, compact. Most security details, you're going to be mounted, so you're going to have something to be able to manipulate in a vehicle or any kind of a close quarter condition. As of 2006, there was two personal defense security teams. There was 2 teams of 14 soldiers each at the 4th Brigade, 4th Infantry Division. So there was a requirement set out. Well, what ended up happening was there was 10 companies that submitted for it, and there were 6 companies that the government looked at and said, we're going to invite you to subject guns for testing. And this was what SIG put in. Now, SIG has done very well over the last couple of years with getting U.S. government contracts for as far as the M17. You look at some of the MCX versions that have been bought by SOCOM and bought by the military. SIG has really, over the last couple of years, stepped it up for as far as U.S. military. For the longest time, they were, in this country, primarily law enforcement. SIG didn't have a lot of presence in the U.S. military. Now they're definitely a force to be reckoned with. So we're going to take a look at this gun from back to front. This gun was released at SHOT Show 2019, and it was certainly not really anticipated, I don't believe. You had something that, when you look at it, it looks awkward. You would say, well, why would you want this when you could have a Glock 17 with a 33 shot magazine? What's the benefit of having this over that pistol? And I can tell you the main benefit to having something this size is you have an ability to shoulder it. You have the ability to have more control over it by being able to use both hands. There definitely is benefits to having something like this over a pistol. It's a lot more stable. Now, for someone like me, this pistol grip would have to go because this is just too small for my hand. As you can see, it has a 20-round magazine. This was designed with a 20-round magazine, but you can also use the 30-round magazine. So we have an overall length of 14.5 inches. The barrel stats on this is a 3.5-inch barrel. This is a very, very short barrel. You do have an integral muzzle brake as well. One of the issues that comes up with a barrel this short is you are not burning up all of your propellant. So you will see a good-sized muzzle flash depending on the ammunition that you're using. Due to the fact that you have such a small barrel, a lot of the ammunition that's used, military-type ammunition, will have will have flash inhibitors. They will prevent a lot of that big muzzle flash that you're going to see with some of your cheaper ammunition that doesn't. So you do have an issue with unburned propellant. Now, the way this is set up right now, this is integral. You would have to replace this barrel with one that's threaded for a suppressor. Like any MPX, you can replace the barrel on this with one, and you're probably going to be going with one with a suppressor if you do change it out. But it sort of defeats the purpose going with any longer of a barrel because this is a subcompact weapon. It's supposed to be small, small as can be. You add a can to it, you're going to be adding, you may as well have the full-size carbine or the MPXK. So you have a 1 10-inch twist right hand. The barrels are nitride treated, which basically all of SIG's right now are. Again, integral muzzle brake. This is part of the barrel. Now your weight's only 4.5 pounds, so this is extremely lightweight for something small, as small as it is. You do have, again, the benefit of a locked breech. You do have the benefit of being able to control. You do have ambidextrous controls on here as well. You have, if you notice on the left side here, we have an ambidextrous magazine release, and we have the standard bolt release on the top and bolt catch on the top right here. But when we flip it over here, you only have a bolt release. This is not a bolt catch on the right side. This is just a bolt release. You have an ambidextrous safety on here, and you also have an ambidextrous charging handle. One of the nice things that SIG also did with the MPX and MCX series to increase the durability of the charging handle was they have 2 steel pins that they put in place in here. So the charging handle is actually engaging these steel pins rather than the aluminum receiver, which is certainly a reliability enhancement for as far as the steel catches not wearing out on the aluminum receiver. Now the finish on here is the Sierra Code E190 per rail spec. This is the exact same finish as the M17, so that certainly could give you an indication. This was the U.S. military version that they submitted to the PSD trials. Magazine we spoke about, 20-30 round capacities. Now the operating mechanism on here is a rotating bolt, lock breech, external piston. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the sucker apart and we're going to see what makes it tick. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the magazine and we're going to check, make sure cleared, no brass, no ammo. Now for this assembly we have to extend the stock, pushing the lower portion of the front and rear pivot pins. Now, looking at the lower receiver, we're going to see some lessons learned from the Colt 9mm submachine gun. An issue that came up with the Colt 9mm submachine gun due to the fact that it was 9mm, it was a much faster burning propellant, you had a much higher rate of fire. So what that does is when the bolt would come back, it would slap the hammer back into the receiver, into the trigger group, a lot more violent than it did with the 5.56. And one of the things that would happen was the back of the hammer, the claw, would hit the rear of the disconnector, and it would break the tail off the back of the disconnector. And, of course, once that happened, you have a malfunctioning weapon. So SIG was aware of that. They were aware of that higher bolt velocity. So what they did was they put a guard in the back of the trigger right over the back of the tail of the disconnector. So when the hammer comes back, that strikes the guard instead of the disconnector, so it doesn't cause any damage to the disconnector. So that's definitely an enhancement over the current Colt 9mm submachine. That was a problem that exists to this day. Now, for as far as the hammer pins, I'm not sure if this is a stainless steel hammer pin or not. That's one of the issues that Colt did as well. They had to go with the stainless steel hammer pin because it was much more durable. Because of that same violent knocking back, you tended to break hammer pins on there as well. You can see the bolt catch on here. We can see the extended paddle on the bolt release, so it's easier to engage from the bottom. As you see from the side here, this is a bolt release, not a catch. You see your buffer back here, and you also see what appears to be an AccuWedge to keep the receivers tight. Now, this is something that's more recently over the last couple of years. Prior to this, SIG had used a spring-loaded plunger on their weapons, and they ended up getting rid of the spring-loaded plunger, and then they went to the more of the AccuWedge type thing. So you can see we have the safety, standard front and rear takedown pins. And as we see some of the screws right here, which are used to remove the barrel. Now to remove the bolt carrier group, we pull back, pull out the assembly, and we have the charging handle. Now looking at the charging handle, we do have a lip that comes on the up here, which is supposed to prevent gas from coming back, hit you in the face. I'm sure it does help, but you still get quite a bit of gas in the face when firing suppressed. When not firing suppressed, like this is set up, this is not a problem. There's no issue with it at all. It's pretty much only an issue when it's suppressed. And we're going to take a look at the bolt mechanism. So you have dual recoil springs. You also have a metal retainer on here. This is one of the things that was changed from the earlier ones, which was plastic. This is the updated mechanism where it's much more easy to work with. You have a dog leg on here that slides right out, so you disengage from the notch. Your whole recoil spring assembly comes right out. There's no reason to take this apart. You can just spray this down with some CLP or any kind of scrubber to make sure you get some oil back on it. Now, for as far as the bolt carrier itself and bolt mechanism, this comes apart the same way it would for any AR-15 M16 type rifle. Push inward on the firing pin retaining pin. And we have our firing pin, and we also have a firing pin spring. Now, there is a reason for this. You have to make sure that whenever you disassemble and reassemble any of the MPX products that you have that spring in there. What that spring does is you have a high rate of fire on here, and you normally without a spring you would have a free-floating firing pin. Because you have such a high rate of fire, when the bolt would close, you have a very good chance of having a slam fire, which is the inertia from the firing pin striking the primer of the cartridge and causing it to fire. Now, this is a much more prevalent problem with the MPX or any of these submachine guns or 9mm because of the fact that the 9mm pistol ammunition has a much softer primer than a military 5.56 or 7.62. In fact, the primers that you have for military ammunition are harder than your standard commercial, and that goes double for the ammunition for pistols. Those primers are significantly more sensitive. So you have to make sure that you have this in there at all times, or you're going to risk having that kind of a slam fire. We pull right out the cam pin, and we pull the bolt out. So we can see our bolt, and we can also pop out our extractor. You can see we have a rubber O-ring on there, which is definitely an enhancement over not having it. I put these on everything that I've got just due to the fact that you get 3 to 4 times the extraction force with a rubber O-ring. In fact, you could remove the spring altogether and just leave the rubber O-ring and the weapon would function normally. So reassembly. Now this only goes in one way. You have a larger end on one side. Make sure that's all the way in and flush. Engage like so. Make sure it's flush. You drop it right back into the bolt carrier. Make sure your extractor is facing 3 o'clock. And we can drop our cam pin right in place. As previously stated, you make sure you have the spring in place. Depressing the firing pin. Insert your firing pin retaining pin. Then we're just going to slide over the dog leg and drop that into place in the notch. And there we have it. So for reassembly, drop the charging handle in. Sure it's in the unlock position, which it will be because of the spring. There you go. The optic I have on here is the Sig Romeo 4S. This I thought was a little more appropriate than a lot of the bigger ones. Now, a lot of people would probably put on one of the smaller RMO type ones, the really tiny one. I didn't want to go that small just because when you're putting something to your shoulder like this, I tend to like to have a little bit more of a screen than you do on some of those smaller ones. Obviously, you can put anything that you would want on here, a red dot, holographic sight, or whatever. This happens just to be the one that I chose. This is an excellent sight. It even has some solar panels on the top of it. It's adjustable for the illumination, so you can adjust towards your ambient light. Comes with a throw lever mount. Now you can also put backup sights on here as well, but these really weren't intended to have backup sights on them. But it does not come with backup sights, but you can certainly add them on there. You know, backup sights are always a good idea, whether it's designed for it or not, because if these batteries go out in an inopportune time, you have a club. And the way this sight is on here, you would still be able to have co-witness as well. So we'll talk a little bit about ammunition as well. As we spoke a little bit about the fact we have a complete SIG weapon system here, which includes gun, scope, and ammunition. I've been using SIG ammunition for quite some time. I've had a lot of really, really good luck with it. They're coming out with a lot of different loads as well. The three main ones that I used in this test were their 124 grain full metal jacket. And out of this little tiny barrel, that was going about 1,086 foot a second. Now, if you look at it, if out of a 4.5 M9 or M17, you're probably looking at around 1,180 foot a second. So you do drop off quite a bit of velocity with this really, really short barrel. And then the other ammunition I did was a 9mm V-Crown, 124 grain, which is what we see right here, which is the jacketed hollow point. There was no issues with malfunctioning whatsoever with this ammunition, and that was about 1,068 foot a second. So you do drop, I would say, a minimum of 100 foot a second, at minimum, with going with a barrel this short versus a standard pistol. But a lot of the ammunition you're seeing here, for instance, the Sig V-Crown, you do have flash inhibitors on there, so you don't get as much of a blinding muzzle flash as you would with some other types of ammunition. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to go to the range and we're going to see how this thing shoots. Well, as you saw from the video, the thing shot quite well. Due to the fact that you can put this up, ATF now allows you to put use the brace as a stock. You get a good solid hold on it, gives you a good accurate pistol. For as far as magazines were concerned, we use both the 20 and a 30 for its design and intent purposes for it being the mobility of it. The 20 rounder is probably a much better option. Reliability. We put a lot of rounds through this thing. We put well over 500 rounds through this with the SIG ammunition you see here, and we had no malfunctions whatsoever. So reliability was right there. Again, a rotating bolt locking mechanism. This extends your reliability and also the wear and tear on the gun. I'm very fond of it. Now, is this gun for everybody? No, but if you are looking for somebody who you want to have something throw in your backpack, or you're looking at something that you want to have in a car, obviously as being a pistol, you can't have it loaded in your car. It's a little overkill. It's relatively large. But for the professional industry, when you are looking at any kind of executive protection, whether it be military or any other kind of protection, this gives you the concealable firepower that you would need to pretty much repel anything, especially if you have this in a selective fire mode. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, please click like, please subscribe, and even better, share. Thank you.